What if I told you that the research says you are losing the equivalent of 14 and a half school days every year? Not to planning, not to grading, not even to meetings, but to managing disruptive behavior. 14 and a half days. That's almost 3 full weeks of school gone. Not because you're doing something wrong, not because your students are uniquely different, but because this is what behavior management actually costs teachers. And most of us have no idea the number is that high. Today, I want to talk about what the research says, why I think the real number is probably even higher, and what this data is actually telling us about the problem underneath the behavior. Let's go. Hey friends, welcome to Enjoy Teaching Again, the podcast for teachers who love the work but need a little spark to bring the joy back. I'm your host, Elizabeth Peterson, classroom teacher, arts integration specialist, and passionate educator of over 25 years. If you're overwhelmed by behaviors, disengaged students, and long, exhausting days, you are not alone. But together, we can turn things around and you can teach with confidence and purpose again. So locate that cold coffee of yours, find your favorite pen, I know you have one, and let's dive in. It's time to get inspired and enjoy teaching again. I want to be upfront with you about what kind of episode this is, because this is actually a research review type of episode. And I'm doing it because I think teachers deserve to see the data that backs up what they are feeling every single day. That the behavior management isn't just hard, it's actually expensive. It's expensive in time and in energy and in the teaching you never got to do. By the end of this episode, I hope that you'll understand what the research actually found, what it means for your classroom specifically, and why this data points at something that we can actually change. So let me tell you about the research first, okay? Because I want to be careful about this and I want you to be able to look it up yourself if you want. In 2019, the Education Advisory Board, a research and advisory firm that works with school districts across the country, published a report called Breaking Bad Behavior: The Rise of Classroom Disruptions in Early Grades and How Districts Are Responding. And of course, I will link it in the show notes, okay? That report included a finding that teachers and researchers have been citing ever since. Teachers estimate spending an average of 2.4 hours per week, or 14 and a half school days per year, managing disruptive behaviors. That finding was then picked up by some researchers at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and their names are Matthew Gormley, Rebecca Overfield, Cassidy Spradlin, Lauren Scanlan, and Susan Sheridan, who used it as background context for their own study on the time and the cost of classroom behavior management. Their study is what I want to tell you about because it went even further than a survey. All right, so here's what makes this a little different from just a statistic. The UNL team, okay, UNL stands for University of Nebraska-Lincoln. They didn't just ask teachers how much time they thought they were spending. They actually sent trained observers into actual classrooms, okay? And data was collected during a baseline from 186 elementary students and their teachers that were participating in a large randomized control trial of a problem-solving consultative intervention. Yes, I actually read that line. Now, those observers, they watched, they recorded, they coded teacher behavior management strategies, and they did it in real time using a 20-second interval recording system during 30-minute observations. And then they did more math. So, assuming 3 seconds of disruption per occurrence, teachers spend, are you ready? 10.95 hours responding to a single referred child's behavior each year. Or they put it into dollars as well, or $433.11 per referred student. Okay, so one child, nearly 11 hours, over $400. And when they scaled that to an average classroom, counting for class size and a percentage of students likely exhibiting these behavioral difficulties, teachers spend a total of 47.26 hours responding to student behavior. Now, the baseline behavior management practices, they put a dollar sign to this as well. They estimated the cost of being $1,871.02 per classroom every year. So nationally, okay, they even went nationally, classroom behavior management exceeds $2 billion for students exhibiting sub-threshold symptomology. Okay, did that stop you in your tracks? Yeah, let me explain what that means. That term, sub-threshold symptomology, it's a clinical way of describing something that all of we teachers know. These are the kids who haven't been formally identified with a behavioral need, right? So there's no IEP, no referral, no official label, but they're in your room. And their behavior is real, and it's costing real time. The researchers included them because the cost doesn't disappear just because there's no paperwork that exists for these kids. All right, can you feel this? Because I feel like we teachers know this in our guts, right? And I'm not sharing that number, all of these numbers, to overwhelm you. I'm sharing them because it confirms something that you already know in your body. This is not a small problem. And it's not just you. Now, here's the part I think you need to sit with. Alrighty, you ready for this? All of this data, it was collected back in 2019, okay? Before the pandemic, before 2 years of disruptive development and social learning, before the mental health crisis in students that every teacher I talk to describes as something that feels just so much different from what they were facing before the pandemic, which, as it was still a real big issue that was growing way before 2020. This is happening in 2019 before like this massive surge of devices and social media that has fundamentally changed how students manage attention and frustration and boredom at home and in the classroom. Now, in the year 2020 to 2021, that school year, 32% of teachers in public schools reported that student behaviors were interfering with their teaching. That's nearly 1 in 3 teachers. Okay. And I'm sorry, because if I was conducting this, I would report that 98% of the teachers I talk to report student behaviors interfering with their teaching, right? Because that's legitimately what I see. If I talk to any teacher and I ask them, what is your main challenge? And I actually do this, okay? What is your main challenge in the classroom? I do this when I invite people into the Facebook community. I ask this every time when a teacher is joining the classroom reset or joining me and learning a new strategy inside of a workshop. What is your biggest challenge? Student behavior is almost always mentioned. So when I say that 14 and a half days of time is spent on managing student behavior, and I say that that's probably an underestimate, I'm not speculating. I'm looking at what I see in front of me every day with teachers. And I'd be willing to bet you would agree, right? So here's the belief that I want to challenge here. It's something I hear from teachers all the time, okay? I hear this a lot. Oh gosh, behavior management is just part of the job now, right? A lot of teachers think, okay, there's no fixing it. You just have to manage it or you don't. And I understand why teachers believe that. I really do. Because when you've been in the classroom long enough, behavior starts to feel like weather. It's like, oh, what's the weather today? It's something you respond to and not something you solve. But here's what the research is actually telling us. When teachers use intentional classroom management strategies, they promote student engagement and reduce disruptive behaviors. which set up their students for success. The research isn't just pointing at a problem. I'd like to think that it's also pointing at a solution, okay? And here's what I find most meaningful about that. The average teacher in this UNL study had 15.3 years of experience. These were not beginner teachers. These were experienced veteran teachers, teachers exactly like the ones I work with, teachers like you, spending nearly 3 weeks a year on behavior management. Not because they don't know how to teach, but because they didn't have the intentional framework underneath the strategies they were trying. And that's why the work I do inside the Classroom Reset is so important for experienced teachers. We talk about and reset all of this, all of the root causes of student behaviors that we're seeing. And we do it in real and practical ways that fit into what you're already teaching and transform your classroom and make so many big impacts on your students. And let's face it, for ourselves too. I want you to have that teaching time back and the sanity back, and you can get it through the Classroom Reset. So let me translate this into something that's pretty real, okay? If you're spending 2.4 hours a week on behavior management, which the research says you probably are, and I say possibly more, that's time you're not spending on the lesson that you planned. It's time you're not spending on the student who needed 5 extra minutes with you. How many kids have you turned away because of this type of thing, right? That's time you're not spending on the creative activity that you had to skip because things just started going sideways on you. That's not wasted time because you're an ineffective teacher. Let me say that again. That is not wasted time because you're ineffective. It's wasted time because behavior has been treated as something to manage in the moment, to react to, rather than something to address proactively and at the root. That's the difference between treating a symptom, the behavior you see in front of you, and treating the source, what's underneath that behavior. Now, I've been talking a lot about your classroom's tripod on the podcast, and if you want a little more information about that, go ahead and check out episode 148. That's where I walk through all 3 legs and I talk about what a wobbly leg actually looks like in your classroom, okay? That's important because when you know which leg of your classroom's tripod is wobbly, whether it's connection or regulation or engagement, you stop reacting to the behavior one incident at a time and start being proactive. And you start addressing the root of the issue before it escalates in the first place. Now, that's not eliminating behavior management. I don't think that's actually possible. There will always be behaviors that we need to deal with. But what it does do is it reduces how much of your day it takes so that what's left you can actually use for, wait for it, teaching. Sound good? So here's what I want you to do with all this, okay? First thing I want you to do is I want you to name your number. Figure out, just think, how much time do you think you're actually spending on behavior management in a week? Not just the 2.4 hours average. What do you think is your number? Is it more? Is it a little less? And what does that add up to across a school year? And if you are part of the challenge, I want you to bring your number with you to the challenge, okay? If you're listening to this during the challenge window, bring this number with you. I want to hear it. It's the kind of information that makes everything you're working on feel even more real and urgent. And if you're listening to this after the challenge has already wrapped up, if you found this episode later, I genuinely want to know your number. Okay, so go find me on Instagram or Facebook, DM me. I'm at The Inspired Classroom on both platforms, and tell me how many hours, how many days you think you're losing. I am very, very curious, and I promise I will respond. All right, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to connect that number to a leg of your tripod, okay? So think about the behaviors that take the most time. Are they connection behaviors? Students who don't feel seen or don't feel safe? Are they regulation behaviors? Students who can't manage their energy or emotions? Or do you think they are engagement behaviors? Students who have just checked out? And here's the thing, if you've been at the Classroom Reset Challenge this week, this is exactly what we're figuring out together on day 1 with our CRE scores. So you may already have your answer. And if you haven't joined us yet and the challenge is still going, there is still time, okay? So get yourself registered. You can still go, hopefully, to theinspiredclassroom.com/challenge and come and find out what your CRE score is. Your classroom's tripod is going to tell you exactly where that time that you do have should be going. And then here's the last thing I want you to do, okay? So after you've figured out what your number is, how much time you're spending on behavior management, you've connected it to one of the legs of the tripod, connection, regulation, or engagement. The third thing I want you to do is I want you to send me something. I want you to DM me, or maybe you get my emails and you can respond to an email. I want to know if you had those 14 and a half days back, or whatever your number ends up being, what would you do with them? What lesson would you teach? What student would you spend more time with? What activity would you do? What would your classroom feel like with 3 more weeks inside of it? So I want you to tell me, okay? So give me your number and then tell me what would you do if you got that time back. The research, it confirmed something that you've probably been feeling for years. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting either. And you're not alone. 14 and a half days is a real number. Now, what you do with that information is what changes everything. Come tell me your number. Start and finish the challenge if that's still available for you. But if you are ready for that even next step, I want you to join me inside the Classroom Reset. It is a guided course for you to help you get all that time, all that energy back. Go check it out at theinspiredclassroom.com/yes. I hope this episode inspired you, encouraged you, or gave you a fresh idea to try. And if so, I would love for you to take a screenshot and text it to one of your teaching buddies. I'm so grateful that you landed here with me today, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave me a review over on Apple Podcast. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll catch you on the next episode. This is Elizabeth Peterson reminding you to get inspired so you can be inspiring to your students and enjoy teaching again.